Good afternoon. Welcome to the County of Santa Clara Finance and Government Operations Committee, which is one of our standing committees of the Board of Supervisors. Let the record show that Supervisor Chavez and I are both present, and we are the two chairs, co-chairs, chair, vice chair of the committee, however you want to put that. I'm going to ask for a quick round of introductions, just in case anyone's here who or watching who isn't aware of who's up on the dais here. So we'll start with Mr. Mitra over to the right.
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Greggy Torria, County Budget Director.
Hi, good afternoon. Miguel Marquez, County's Chief Operating Officer.
Jeff Smith, County Executive.
Dave Cortese, Board of Supervisors.
Cindy Chavez, Board of Supervisors.
All right, so now it's official that we're all here. We will go to public comment, which is item number 2. This is reserved for comment on items which are not on the agenda but would be generally within the purview of the committee. And we do have one request, Scott Largent. I won't explain the rules anymore, Scott, because I know that you know them, and you will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Cortese. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Colin. Yesterday's meeting was very interesting at the Reentry Network, Supervisor Chavez. I do enjoy going to those meetings and trying to provide my feedback of navigating the system. I like how the conversation is now getting to the point of before people get into that reentry center. I mean, it was great to start hearing that. I'm trying to figure out, you guys know I've come here a lot, and that I attempted to utilize services that I really was never able to use. You know, if I was a felon, I would have had access to stuff. There was just a lot of different roadblocks. And what I did is I documented all of it. I went to locations, facilities, you know, I grabbed literature, and my main thing is that at least I can show my ex that I was attempting to do the right stuff. Now, it was very important. My ex, Jennifer, said that I had to get into drug treatment, that I had to get mental health services, that I had to do all these things as part of getting back into her life and being a father to my daughter. These are some pictures of when I first got sober. This is me with my ex, Jennifer, and my child. This is me with Kalia right here when I first got sober. This is at the park with Kalia. This was everything working out. And the problem is when I kept explaining this to my ex that I could not get into detox, that I could not get mental health services, you know, drug treatment. She thought it was the same old thing I gave her for 2 years when I was using on the streets. It was always an excuse. How do I don't know what to do. I mean, a couple people after the meeting, Cindy, came up to me, and there were commissioners on there on the board. They're trying to get creative with it now. They're mothers. They obviously realize that I love my daughter to death. They've realized they've listened to me talk I've talked over 2,200 times now at all the different committees and meetings, and they're realizing what I've done, that I am doing the right thing, but it's kind of, I'm over here in a corner, and I would just ask for help. Is there any, I mean, I have documented what I have done. It will help the reentry network of what you guys are working on. I figured out every loophole, every door, you know, all that. And I would love to provide that information. Remember, I'm not going through a high-end divorce. I'm not a felon. I'm not on probation. So there's not all these obstacles to say, hey, we don't want to look into this because he's currently stuck in the, no. I'm just an ordinary person that took a drug diversion charge that got sober to be in my kid's life and ran into a lot of roadblocks that I would think the county would not want other people to run into. And it saves you guys time, 2,200 times of talking. You guys don't want to hear me anymore. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your attendance today. We will move on now from public comment to item 3, which is the consent calendar. And Supervisor Chavez, we're open to suggestions on what we should include on our consent calendar. We have items 7, 8, 9, 10, in 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 were included as part of the published agenda, which leaves basically this question on item 4 about the fairgrounds reports, item 5 about interoperability, and then item 6, which are the various budget items that we're being asked to receive, budget reports. So what do you want to do with those?
So what I would recommend is that we defer item 4 for the Fairgrounds Master Plan and to the next meeting. And then what I'd like to do is put item 5 on consent. And then I have a comment on item 9, and then I want to just suggest that what we do with item 6 is leave it on the agenda and then see if there are additional pieces of information, both that we can get from Greg and from different departments. On item 9, what I would like to request is that we agendize for this board a discussion about our broader strategy relative to CalPERS, both the retirement and medical OPEB and what I will do is my recommendation is that what we have a deeper dive on is the strategies used for prepayment for CalPERS and the opportunities that we see relative to emerging healthcare laws relative to OPEB, and have that come back to this body after having an opportunity to confer with Dr. Smith about what would be an appropriate timeline for that discussion.
Okay, so bringing that discussion back essentially on the work plan or adding it to the work plan. Did you want Dr. Smith to comment now on when he thinks that would be appropriate?
No, I was just hoping maybe you could work.
You can work with him
yeah.
as the chair of the committee.
Yeah,
Fine,
absolutely.
we'll do that.
So then
Understood.
we would be adding 4 for deferral, 5 for also for consent, leaving 6 on.
Right, okay. That's an agreeable motion. And that leaves 6, which isn't really just one item. It's 6A through M. So a little bit there to do, depending on how much people want to say on those items. But to the clerk, we'll go ahead and adopt that final consent motion, essentially leaving everything but 6 on consent for deferred. Yes, got it? Oh, we do have a speaker on one of the consent items, item 11. And there, we have a speaker on 6 as well. We'll take you in a moment when we get to 6. Scott, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. A very alert clerk who caught it for me. Thank you.
Good man. Colin's one of my favorite ones. He is very on the ball with things. Thanks, bud. The on the consent calendar, it's kind of weird. I hope we didn't get rid of Cheryl, but I guess.
No, we didn't get rid of her.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where she is
I was a little worried.
today.
Okay.
So Cheryl, if you're listening, we still adore you.
Yeah, no. I still want Cheryl up there. So that was normally Cheryl's seat over there. We're on here on item 11 about the management audit thing, and that's what was concerning, not seeing Cheryl, because I know she was kind of understaffed with the management audit thing, and I hear that a lot, that she needs more help. And so I was hoping that we didn't get rid of her and not get her more help. So now on the audits, and I know this was put on the consent calendar, we have not audited, I believe, the county counsel's office since 1989. I might be incorrect on that, but that was some of the research I was able to find. There was different smaller audits that they did through outside companies, and I was able to get one that involved the Law Foundation and then Legal Aid Society. I guess what I'm trying to get at is the Independent Defense Counsel office. And I've talked about that a lot. I do believe they are cover-up attorneys for our county to protect, kind of hide civil rights violations. You don't normally get to go through the regular public defender's office. They conflict out. The IDO will micromanage these cases to get the best outcome for the county. I want to start seeing some information about the IDO. Now, what I want to see is this audit done through the county counsel's office. Is there a separate audit for it? I want to start seeing what's going on with the IDO. Now, we have kind of a satellite location over there off of social services. No one's ever there. They always say that it's, out of sight, out of mind, but it is under the umbrella of the county council's office, and it would be some helpful information. They did an audit that they said was kind of like a staff report, I believe about 9 years ago, and I still haven't been able to obtain that audit from the county. So I'm digging and digging, and I just think the IDO is just, something's fishy, something stinks. And that's my representation that will be coming up for that Bullhorn trial, and I'm concerned that they'll set me up to fail like they did with Victorious and Susan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks again for being here. And we will conclude the consent calendar, then the motion is adopted unanimously. And again, 4 was deferred. Everything other than 6 and 4 was placed on consent, in case there's any confusion about that. We'll clear that up. So we're now dealing with the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget proposals. That's 6A through 6M, as in Mary, on the agenda. I had casually mentioned as I sat down here to my colleague that the reports were very clear on these as to what folks are doing. From my standpoint, with the one exception of 6L, Technology Services and Solutions Budget Proposal, which I think basically said there's going to be more information coming. So I didn't know if that meant here or in the base budget or in May hearings, and I'd be comfortable probably with any of the above. But if
Base
somebody
budget.
Base budget, okay. So nobody wanted to add anything here. That's what I wasn't clear on. I think Supervisor Chavez, in her consent motion, was sort of saying that the way that we would probably best deal with these, which would in many cases otherwise be consent items at this point, is just ask if there's anything else that anybody who's involved with these reports under item 6 wishes to add at this time in terms of additional oral comment or testimony, clarifications, typos, anything like that that we should know, before we move forward and receive the reports. I will turn to Supervisor Chavez and see if she has any specific questions about any of the items herself. But I just asked mine, which was on 6L, and I got the answer, so I'm comfortable there. Mr. Mills, is there anything you wanted to add to any of these?
No, actually,
sub-reports?
John Mills, Employee Services Agency Director. I just came up because I'm 6A. So
we want you to answer for all of them.
Yeah,
6A through M.
so just under the presumption that you wanted to start with A, I don't have anything further to add to the materials that are in the agenda packet. We did, as I believe all the other departments did, prepared sort of an executive summary and a table summarizing our budget requests, and also included the full submittal that we submitted to the county executive's office and OBA that provides all the narrative and detail.
And I think we appreciate that very much. Supervisor Chavez, any questions on 6A?
None, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Mills. So we'll just run right through them to make sure nobody's.
Dave, can I go back just to maybe a broader question?
Sure.
And just to make a comment about one of the challenges with asking questions is that not having the base budget is a bit of a challenge, and the other is we're adding staff without, in most areas, not understanding what the implications of the staff are, meaning like we're going to shorten the amount of time someone waits for X, or that, and there's some exceptions to that, like ROV was able to say these staff people have these specific language skills. And really my observation was we're so all over the map in terms of what kind of information people give you that therefore you give us. It was hard for me to know how to prioritize what you all are seeing. So I'm sure you are having a similar challenge.
Well, Supervisor, that's why the county exec comes back with a recommended budget. You won't see all of the things that are being suggested by the department heads because they're out of context. And
Well, what I more mean, Dr. Smith, isn't just the context issue. It's also the value add issue, which if you are getting more detailed information than this, that as you make a budget recommendation to the board, it would be interesting just to see it. I really was commenting more on the direction I know you're going in, which is how do we learn how to quantify the investments relative to the outcomes that we're getting from all the departments. And there are just so many of them. It's really more of an observation that we're at the beginning of changing the budgeting process. It's not more than that, was my only point. But I did want to ask a bigger question about the hospitals, and I'm asking that kind of relative overall, and then I have a question about county council's budget. So when I looked at the reserve, our reserve policy is, if I'm remembering it, it's 5% of general fund.
That's for the contingency reserve.
And then what's the other reserve? There's contingency, and then there's...
Well, we've created a number of reserves, and when you get the recommended budget in May,
it'll have all of it, yeah.
There'll be a number of other reserves, but we typically have reserves for unexpected eventualities. We're going to have a reserve for the expansion of the health system.
So there will be, you're going to, in the recommended budget, there will be, okay, that was actually my question.
And there will be reserves for
Got it.
capital projects also.
So one of the reasons I'm asking the question is that I know you all are paying a lot of attention to what's happening at a federal level relative to the budget, but when we think about the general fund reserves, I don't necessarily think about the president completely destroying the Affordable Care Act, and it looks like they're making every attempt to damage it to a point that at some point it may not be as solvent as we see it today. And so what I was wondering as part of when you're looking at the hospital contingency or the health care system contingency in particular, that the contingency is not a percentage of general fund, it's a percentage of overall risk. Is that accurate?
It's not a percentage, it's an amount that we think we might be at risk for, those given issues over the next fiscal year, but it's not really a percent. It's looking at...
It's the total amount you think that we could be at risk. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. And then the other part of that is, I know we do annual budgeting. I'm wondering about, particularly with contingency reserves, not with the other methods of budgeting we're using, but I'm wondering relative to contingency reserves whether or not it's necessary for us to extend those into reserve policies, not unlike the way we've done with pre-funding. I think we pre-fund OPEB now, or the pension fund. I can't remember which one of them we're pre-funding.
OPEB.
I'm sorry, OPEB. So I ask that because I wonder if this would require some sort of a policy that protects a contingency fund, particularly for the healthcare system, over some number of years. And partly I'm relating that to the point that you raised earlier about how, it's a multi-year process in terms of this integration. So really it's a question, is that something you're going to recommend as part of budget?
No.
Why not?
Because yearly budget is the only way that we have the flexibility to balance. If we commit multi-year budgeting, basically we can't balance in every year. The moving parts in the budget really require us to have the flexibility to make a recommendation to the board that's consistent with their policies and procedures.
Mm-hmm.
For example, just take OPEB, for example. The board passed a ordinance to require us to pay the ARC, the actually required contribution every year, and we've been doing that. It took us 5 years to get up to that. We continue to do it, and we'll continue to do it on an ongoing basis. But then also the board, not in an ordinance form, but in a policy form, wanted us to consider using 20% of all of the redevelopment funds that were created. Well, that would put us way over ARC, because we've currently in 7 years generated for the county as a whole $1.9 billion of new money from the dissolution of redevelopment, and that's about $180 million for us, and that doesn't count excess ERAF and other money. So if we actually did that, we would be paying basically twice as much as ARC, and that would mean we couldn't balance the budget and we'd have to start cutting projects. So
I think,
the point is that
yeah, let me just say this, Jeff, I don't think we should do that by ordinance. Like part of the reason I want to have the OPEB discussion and the CalPERS discussion again is that I actually think we need to examine the strategy we're using to make these investments, because it does not appear to me from looking at the CAFR that the multi-year strategy necessarily has been beneficial financially for us. I don't even mean from a flexibility perspective. I mean from the long-term investment. So really, I'm not suggesting we do anything by ordinance, and I'm also not suggesting that we take, because what would have made more sense to me on the CalPERS OPEB strategy would have been to have given the flexibility annually and to put the money, any money that we thought we might put into that at whatever time, in a much more flexible fund that gave us the flexibility to respond to emergencies while we were trying to buy this debt down. So the reason I was asking about the multi-year opportunity with the hospital was that with one of the boards I sit on outside of the county, they have set some money aside that's in a, it's in a relatively aggressive set of investments, but that you're allowed to pull from that in order to pay down any number of opportunities where you see that paying forward right now for interest rate reasons or whatever makes some more sense than just automatically paying into something that may or may not be advantageous that year or over some number of years. So definitely not an ordinance. I was more thinking about it from a budget strategy so that we were more aware of the constraints of opportunity that you may want us to be thinking about by being able to say, we're maintaining this rate because we think we're going to have some risk over X number of years for Y number of reasons, but not for an ordinance. I think that's right. It makes sense what you're saying, Jeff.
okay, maybe I'd better talk to you offline more about it, because I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. It sounds like I don't.
Well, I know. Well, Dave will translate later. No, then one other thing I just wanted to ask, and this is about a particular budget. We had talked at a board meeting about whether or not it made sense for us to add a couple of attorneys to county council for the purposes of being able to address immigration issues. And one of the reasons for that, Dr. Smith, I just want to make you aware of this, is that, and we talked about it at a full board meeting, but just to kind of illuminate this for you, and I don't know, Steve, if you have any comments about this, but Dave and I had an opportunity to meet with a couple of different law firms that have been doing social justice work in the community. And one of the points they raised with us is we were really looking forward to seeing whether or not it was possible for us to leverage outside private sector attorneys to take some bigger cases on for the smaller nonprofits. What they told us is the biggest challenge they have, especially as it relates to immigration law, where those cases can be multi-year and just very complicated, is that absent them knowing that the law firm is going to be intact, that it's still really strong, and that there's somebody there that can help them with the case, and absent making sure that they have a resource that can update them pretty quickly on what the changes in the laws have been, that it's harder for them, for even big law programs, to get these really good, to get these firms that have people who could take on these longer cases. And because of that, what they have is these large firms with really talented people coming in for one day of filling out paperwork, like temporary restraining orders or the like. So they had made a recommendation that we bring on a couple of attorneys that primarily practice immigration law as a way to stem, honestly, the $5 million or $6 million we're spending a year now, because there's no way we're going to get to scale, no matter how much money we thought we could invest in it. And so that was their recommendation, and I'd be really interested in us pursuing it. I just don't know if that's something you all discussed.
Yeah, we've been discussing that with county council.
Do you have a recommendation? Because I
yet.
didn't see it in here.
Yeah, this is their recommendation.
So
We'll have a recommendation on May 1st.
Okay. Do you have thoughts about? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, I think you explained it very, very well. But clearly they're talking about the natural lack of continuity there is with pro bono counsel in any firm. Even if the folks stay there for 20 years, they're not going to necessarily be able to commit to a matter long term. They may be able to commit, as Shaw was saying, for 6 months at a time and so forth. We see that all the time. So then the issue becomes who can manage the case to make sure there's continuity and there's a clean handoff and there's institutional knowledge is passed on, and I think that's where the thought came back.
Yeah.
Well, the one place that would, given how many folks are out there potentially available to be managed, the best place to get continuity would be here. So I just wanted to give my own little, put my own lens on what you were saying there, which just seems very compelling in terms of trying to maximize the investment that we're, as Supervisor Chavez said, that we're already making. And by the way, that wasn't an FGOC meeting. We weren't on FGOC at that time, but we were just essentially called into a meeting, which was a lot more about our pro bono, about our immigration defense investment dollars in general, which of course is a Board of Supervisors mandate that just happened to have that twist to it. So I just want to clarify that.
I'll ask my colleague Greta Hansen, who's sitting at the staff table to comment if necessary, but I'll just add that from my private practice experience is very consistent with what the comment you made about
Interesting.
the lack of continuity and what's needed to keep a case running over the years.
Greta, did you want to say anything?
No, I'm happy to come back with more information on this, and I don't know that I've been privy to all the conversations that have happened around it, but there are some structural challenges that we would have to grapple with if that were contemplated in our office, and that it would be a departure from the pure representation of the county. That's the core of our business. So there's some structural considerations if we were to even contemplate that we need to figure out because of the role the attorneys in our office play vis-a-vis the county as entity. And thinking about how this type of a function where there would be a representation of outside individuals as part of the core work of attorneys in our office, as opposed to just folks in our office doing pro bono work on their own time, that we would need to really vet to make sure that we wouldn't.
And also, if it's not appropriate for your office, where? I mean, I'm fine with that too. I think the reason we thought about you all was because of the work you're doing with impact litigation, and that really requires you to be more up to date on a lot of different kinds of issues than most parts of the county. But if not you, we have other parts of the county that do represent individuals, right? The one that's a subset of you all, but I don't know if that's IDO, if that's the public defender.
Well, we can absolutely come back with some thoughts on how best
thank
that
you.
could be structured if it's not in our office.
That'd be great. Thanks, Greta.
I would just say, and I don't know if you agree, Supervisor Chavez, but if there's, if there's potential in the idea, I mean, if it has legs over the course of the fiscal year that we're going to be encountering here, I guess it would just be our preference. I think I'm speaking for both of us to set aside, a couple of FTE. I'd rather have a couple FTE funded in the budget in case you can stand this up, as opposed to not having it there and saying, well, there's not much of a budget mandate behind this, so we'll work conceptually toward next year, and then we're I think we're all a little bit nervous about in that realm right now, given the rhetoric that we're hearing out of Washington, whether or not we need to start standing up more programs a lot more quickly, than we've had to do for the last year or so. So that's just my thought. It's really just a budget.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
A set aside, or whatever you would call that, Jeff, kind of reserving, having some dollars there. And I understand operationally we could put a referral in at any point during the year and try to add those FTE, but it might give people some comfort who are trying to structure this to know that the money's there if they can figure out a way to do it.
And I just have one last question, not on this item, but just a budget question that Dr. Smith, through you, I'll just mention to John. Throughout the years, I know we've looked at areas where we might need to overstrength different departments. And I know we've done that, for example, in the CAN Center, because we didn't want to have missing chairs when people were calling the 911. I wondered, I couldn't remember the resolution around county comm relative to that same topic. when I read their budget, it's not really reflected, and you may not know the answer off the top of your head, but what I was hoping as part of the budget report out, if you could just highlight the areas that you are already working with them to overstrength, and I think there's only a few, but just what they are and why would be helpful. Thank you. That's all I had on the budget.
Okay, so we haven't had, obviously, the rest of the folks come up. We've had county council up here, we've had employee services up here. ROV, county executives already up here. Assessor's budget proposal, finance agency budget proposal, procurement department budget proposal, facilities and fleet department budget proposal, county comm you just spoke to, sanitation district budget proposal, technology services is the one I asked the question on about additional information that's going to come in the recommended budget, and then technology funding budget proposal. So we didn't come in with questions on these, correct? Is that correct? Because we got what we needed from the reports that break out FTE and all kinds of things, including our nice job ROV. I thought yours was very detailed. But if somebody wants, as I started to say earlier, to come up on any of these items, county assessor, anyone in, you're welcome to come up. So let me just, if no one stands up, we're going to keep moving. ROV, did you wish to add anything to your written documents? Okay. County executive, do you wish to add anything to your written submittal? No. Okay. Clerk of the board, it's kind of a no increase budget proposal. Okay. All right. You must have made the county executive very happy. The assessor, Mr. Stone, anything you want to add orally to your, okay, great. Yeah, no, it's pretty straightforward. We see that you got some computer, some TI stuff that needs to be invested in, and we understand that here, so thank you. County council we already dealt with. Finance agency, anything to add? Procurement department, okay. Facilities and fleet department, nothing to add. County comm, I'll give them a chance to see if they have anything to add. They heard Supervisor Chavez's point. No? Sanitation district, oh, we do? Great, come on up. Sorry, I didn't mean to preempt you. Microphone.
Now is it on?
It
There
is.
we go. Good afternoon. I'm Heather Plumondon, Director of County Communications. We actually have worked with the ESA and do have unclassified or overstaffed positions. We have 8 of them identified in County Comm now that we're working really hard to fill. So we've satisfied that at this point.
And by satisfied, you meaning that you are caught up with where you need to be for hiring?
We are not caught up with where we need to be, but we are running 4 recruitment processes a year, scheduled, and working really hard to try to modify the training program so that it's shorter in duration and the staff has a better opportunity for success. But we do have the 8 additional positions that we are allowed to recruit for, and we're trying to fill them every time we do a recruitment.
So is it going to be possible, given the current changes you're making, is it going to be possible for you to get caught up or to surpass what your need is?
We fully expect to be able to get caught up probably within a year is our goal.
That's great. If that changes, I would want us to know that, and in part because I'm nervous about I know you have a lot of people who are working a lot of overtime, and it would be terrible to be getting new people and losing people at the same time, so.
We're working on it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sanitation district, anybody need to speak?
No.
All set? Okay, thank you. Yes, Supervisor Chavez.
I do just have one question on that topic, and that is, are we looking at any additional expansion that may be necessary? Here, let me just say the question I'm trying to ask. I know we are having some challenges with the city of San Jose.
Yes.
Okay. So, period. And I know that there's also a lot of work being done right now to make sure that the area that the sanitation district, the area that the facility is in right now is going to be threatened, I think, pretty significantly by rising waters. And I'm mostly asking whether or not we have any money set aside for investigating alternative locations for the water treatment plant.
For the City of San Jose wastewater treatment plant?
I meant for, because don't we use that part of that too? We're investors in that?
Yes. So that's actually the largest budget increase request that is associated with the budget. That's the $500,000 increase in the budget as opposed to last year. But that does not really include any expectation for relocating the wastewater treatment plant at all. That's expanding and modernizing the wastewater treatment plant where it is.
So, Dr. Smith, I think the one point I would just like to make is after talking to other cities and departments, I have a little bit of a fear about us investing quite so much money in something that is going to be threatened by climate change, I think, in our lifetime. I am really worried about it, and I'm worried that we're investing an awful lot in one location. And so the one recommendation I would like to make is that even if it's a small amount of money for an outside consultant to help us think about where a phase 2 may be, because one of the concerns I have with the city's approach is it's very, well, there's a lot of concerns I have about the approach, but the primary one being that the strategies for investment are so significant in one location, and I'm just not sure long-term that makes sense. So anyway, I more mention it as something that's worth us thinking a little bit more about in the future, but just the back and forth we're having with them has made me think more about just the length of time it's taken you guys to get this far and whether or not we need to start thinking about an alternative location just because population is going to continue to grow. So anyway, that not to take us too far.
You mean an alternative location for a waste treatment plant?
Mm-hmm. And part of that, I think, is going to be connected to how we address water long term, really how we're dealing with water availability for the region and just capacity. And this Santa Clara Valley Water District has been interested in looking at alternative partnerships for development of both the wastewater treatment plant, but also looking at how to preserve and protect water more in the south part of the county. And just a discussion with them made me think I should raise it here for you. It wasn't the meeting was one that I actually recommended that Norma, that the director see you directly about, just because I thought it was a much bigger planning process than just talking to me about it off the cuff.
Okay, I understand.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, that's all for Sanitation District. Thank you. Technology Services and Solutions, anything to add? Okay, thank you. And Technology Funding Budget Proposal, same? Okay, all right, so that brings us through 6A through M for now. Stay tuned for the recommended budget. And we do, yes, come on up. Mr. Muirhead, you want to speak, I think, on 6D, which is Clerk of the Board budget proposal?
Actually, I was hoping to escape speaking, and that's why I put it in writing, but I'm here. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, supervisors and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. I know you don't want our residents wandering around dazed and confused, and so I'm asking you to have the Clerk of the Board put into plain English this strategy, quote, build cohesion to counter discontinuity. Thank you very much.
Build cohesion to counter discontinuity. That was heard loud and clear. Plus, I'm going to be handing this request to speak form, which has it written on it, to the clerk. So they'll have it, and we'll look forward to hearing more about that, I'm sure, in the May study sessions. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda, and the next regular meeting of the FGOC committee is Thursday, May 9, 2019 at 2 p.m. here in the chambers. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah.